Hi, I'm Diane McGarry with Dracut Arts. With me today are co-host Tom McGarry and mezzo-soprano Clara Sandler and pianist Linda Papatopoli of the Boston Arts Consort. Clara is a native of Buenos Aires, Argentina, and she feels at home in a wide range of styles, from opera and oratorio to recitals and the tango. She has been praised by the Boston Globe for her dark and attractive timbre. Clara is also a certified teacher of the Alexander Technique and a member of the Alexander Technique International. She teaches Alexander Technique in Boston, New York, Argentina, Uruguay, and Ireland. Pianist Linda Papatopoli performs extensively in the Boston area as a soloist and accompanist, and has given performances in Europe, Japan, and at Carnegie Hall. She curates a musical aperitif concert series in Harvard Square. Linda's interest in literature and culture has led her to found the Boston Arts Consort, presenting multifaceted music and cultural programs with the music and culture of Spain at its heart. We're so glad to have you back again, Linda and Clara. This is great.
Yeah.
Can you
Thank you
tell
for
us?
having us.
Oh gosh, it's such a pleasure. So, your new concert is called Spain in Music and Words, celebrating Spanish vocal composers and the writers who inspired them. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Linda, would you like to talk about that?
Yes. Clara and I have done many concerts of Spanish music over the past 7 years or so, but we wanted to highlight the poetry behind the songs that Clara sings, and the poets. When we do German lieder or French song or opera, people are more familiar with the poetry. They've heard it more, but in the Spanish song, I don't think they know who the poets are, and they may not even be as familiar with Spanish art song. So this was our goal. Clara did a lot of wonderful research on the poets, and she could talk more about that. And of course, the music is lovely and so supports the poem as any composer would want to do.
So of course, all songs are based on, or most songs are based on poems. We wanted to choose some songs that the texts were by some of the main poets in Spain. So for example, the song Madre la mi madre, Mother, oh my mother, the text is by Cervantes, who of course wrote El Quijote de la Mancha. And then we chose this song cycle by Rodolfo Halfter, and the poet is Rafael Alberti, who's one of the main poets in Spain. And he belonged to a generation of very important poets. Garcia Lorca was also part of this group. And this generation was called the Silver Age of Spanish literature. And Rafael Alberti got many prizes for his poems. And when the Civil War happened in Spain, he was a leftist poet, and many of them were. So they had to go into exile when the right wing won the Spanish Civil War. So he actually went to emigrated to Argentina, where I come from. And actually Manuel de Falla also emigrated to Argentina. And he then moved to Rome, and he went back to Spain when after the Franco era, and he was named Hijo Predilecto de Andalucía in 1983, which is, Hijo Predilecto is like the favorite son of Andalusia. And he was also got a doctor honoris causa from the University of Cadiz in 1985. And these songs have the text of one of his cycles, and it's called Marinero en Tierra, which is sailor on land. And he won a national prize for literature in 1924 when he presented these songs. And of course, Rodolfo Halfter was also part of this group, the composer. He came from a family of composers and in Madrid, and it's called the Grupo de los Ocho, the group of the 8. And they wanted to revise the conservatism in Spanish music. And he also emigrated, and he emigrated to Mexico. So we chose these songs because of the importance of both the poet and the composer.
You see, there's such a rich history in all of this, which Clara so well explained. And there are a few other things in the program I find interesting. One is a Catalan folk song. It's actually a Christmas carol. It's quite beautiful. And it's called El Noi de la Mar. I hope if there's any Catalans out there, they don't mind my accent. I don't know if I pronounced that perfectly, but it's a really beautiful. Of course, we don't know. It's a folk song, traditional song. We don't know who the composer is, but it seems to have come about in the 6th century, really, really old song with beautiful, beautiful words. And another piece I'm doing on my own, a solo, is by the great composer, Enrique Granados. He was a fabulous composer for piano. He also wrote opera. He did not live very long, sad to say, but he a huge amount of wonderful music. And this piece is called Danza de la Rose, Dance of the Rose. And it's from a suite called Scenes Poéticos, Scenas Poéticos, Poetic Scenes. And just like other cultures, often a piano piece, they would call a poem for piano or something like that. So they were sort of combining the arts in a way. They were writing poetic music, and I loved that idea. So even though that's a solo, it has a sense of poetry behind it, which actually Granados was really well versed in literature and poetry. So those are 2 other interesting things that we're doing on the program.
And I should say that Granados, his life was cut short because he had been invited to present his opera Goyescas in New York during or towards the end, I think, of World War I. And the president of the United States at the time, after the opera, invited him to stay longer so he could play at the White House. And when he and his wife were on the boat, on the ship going back to Spain, the ship was torpedoed by, yeah. So, and he died trying to save his wife.
Oh my.
So it's very sad. Wonderful composer. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that, Clara.
Well, we forget the effects that war have on everything that we do.
Yes.
Yeah, and that like these poets and composers who had to emigrate because of the war in Spain, and then Granados also dying this way. Yeah, I mean, it really alters our lives.
And I think the music that we're doing as well, it was a time in Spain that Spain was extremely poor. And Granados, for instance, went with Albéniz and a few of the other composers to Paris and was practically jealous of what they were able to do. Went back to Spain and worked so hard to bring Spanish music to the world with not a lot of money. And it was a very poor country. So you see, and then war, of course, does all that too. It affects the arts. But as we were saying in our interview about the arts, people can't help but be creative. And you have these wonderful poetic and musical geniuses. They keep at it, thank goodness.
Yeah, thank goodness.
Mm.
Yes, definitely. Thank goodness for them, for their insights too, and a way to sustain their culture, really
Mhm.
caring about sustaining themselves and their culture.
Exactly.
Huh. This is a little bit off of that, but Clara, can you talk a little bit about Alexander technique for the people who have no idea what that is, since you're so
Sure,
involved with it?
sure. The Alexander technique is a method that helps us develop our conscious awareness of how we use our whole selves. So, and it provides tools to help us change any habits that habits are usually subconscious, you know, like if people are like this or like that at the computer, you know. So habits are usually subconscious. We start developing them since we're children. And so they are so ingrained in us that they are part of who we are and what our identity is. So what we look into with the Alexander technique is discovering with awareness what those habits that we don't need are. So we need tension to live, but we don't need excess tension, which can become chronic pain. So we look at that and we help the students let go of those habits and create a new habit of being aware of what you're doing, while you're doing, and how you're doing it. So it's really like thinking in activity. Like when I'm singing, for example, through my training in the Alexander technique, I learned how to not only pay attention to what I'm singing about, but also keeping a general awareness of what's going on within myself. And that takes time and takes practice. But it's just wonderful. I mean, I think my singing I was able to change not only my singing, but my whole life.
But Alexander technique isn't just for musicians, right? It's for
No. It's for, I mean, usually musicians and dancers and actors and athletes use it just to improve their whole self in performance, whatever their performance is. But it's really for anybody. You know, if somebody has to spend hours at a computer and ends up with pain and shoulder pain, and so this really helps. And actually, I was having a lot of headaches, and my fingers were getting tingly, and I had an MRI, and I discovered I have or had a herniated disc in my neck. And first I got some cortisone shots and some exercises, which helped, but it wasn't a solution. And so I decided that I would go through the Alexander technique and see if that would help me. And I can say I have no more issues, no more pain.
Wow.
Wow.
No more headaches, no more tingling in my hands. It's really,
That's really amazing.
it really has changed my life.
That's great. Wow.
So it's a way of aligning your body, yes? So that
In
you're
part, yes. In part is a way of aligning your body, of being able to, well, I mean, our heads are very heavy. So the way, you know, they're 12 to 15 pounds. So what you do with your head will determine a lot of what happens in the rest of your body. The head-neck relation is very important. But we deal with posture, although we don't talk about posture because posture has, you know, people get tight when we think, okay, posture, straight.
right. It has a whole image, right, of those. standing up
Right.
straight and, you know.
So this is not really about posture as a holding yourself, but more like movement,
Mm.
expanding yourself in every direction.
Wow.
What a beautiful way to say that.
Yeah.
It's an incredible thing. I mean, I love it.
That's neat. Thank you very much.
Sure.
So, ladies, you have been fantastic musicians for almost your entire lives. How did you become musicians? What led you to be a singer and a pianist?
Linda, would you like to?
Okay, yes. I was just thinking about what you said of a direction. I liked that as well. Um, I think for me, and I think for many people, it's not just one thing. I didn't come from a classical music family. My sister tap danced, and my parents were good ballroom dancers. So that was always in the home, and the radio was always on, and someone was always humming something. But I do remember two big things. One was that my father and my sister and I singing "Row, row, row your boat" in a round, and then my sister ran out to play. She was more active than I was, and my father had to go to work or something, and I started to cry because it stopped. So, I think I didn't know why, but looking back, it was just so nice to make that music with other people. And I remember hearing and seeing Swan Lake Ballet when I was very young on television, and I was transfixed.
Oh, wow.
And I happened to find the record in some offbeat store, and I brought it home, and I kept playing it over and over and over and over and over and over again. And neighbors of my grandmother had a piano, and the young lady who was a good 10 years older than me, she played, and she would let me watch her practice, which was really fun. And she'd let me play her piano because no one else would let me touch a piano, believe it or not. Those days when you were,
Oh, yeah, no.
yeah, no, I couldn't.
Bang or whatever. Yeah, people would say, "Oh, stay away from their piano when they
Exactly.
come to my house." I'm like, well, if they touch it nicely and gently, they can touch the keys.
Oh, no. Honestly, it was a total opposite for me. But this young lady would let me play. So I started to beg for lessons. Took a while. And I started to take lessons with a wonderful teacher. He had just moved, and luckily we moved into a community that had a fabulous teacher. And that was my beginning. She became a mentor and a teacher until I went to college, which was great. So I guess like anyone, I think everyone has maybe more than one thing they're good at, but maybe one thing that they really like and they'll stick to, and they don't mind the scales. They don't mind the hard part of it. I think that's the way it is with everyone, really. So that was my beginning, and I stayed with it. That's how I began, and here I am.
Well, I'm really glad you are because I love hearing you play,
Well, thank you.
really. And I can tell too, not just as a soloist, but also as an accompanist, you hold the people you're playing with, which is very nice. And not all pianists can do that.
Oh, thank you very much. And it's certainly a pleasure to play for Clara because she's such a fabulous mezzo soprano. So, it starts to feel like one piece after a while when you know someone too. And that's a really lovely experience as a pianist.
Yeah, well, and I love singing with you. Yeah. So my beginnings, I am in my house. I mean, there are no musicians in my household, but my dad was a tango fan, so there was always tango at home playing. And my mom loved Viennese operetta, so we had that too. And I always liked to sing. I played the guitar in my teens, but I was very shy. I was terribly shy. So when there were parties for teenagers and people would start getting their guitars out. Oh, Clara, come on, sing. And I was like, so eventually I would sing and I would feel good about singing. And I found that because I was so shy and introverted, singing and playing the guitar was really a way of expressing myself that I couldn't do other ways because I was really very shy. And then a friend of mine once heard me sing in a party and he said, "Oh, you should come visit my teacher." So I was already 20 by that time, or 21. And so I went to visit this teacher with my guitar and I sang Blowing in the Wind. So he took me as a student and I started finding that I had a voice that could be developed. But I never really thought of it as something I would do. This was just a side. So I went to the university to study sociology. And I actually graduated. But I kept singing and taking voice lessons, and there were some student recitals that I participated. And then there was, the time in 1977, Argentina was going through very tough military dictatorship. And my boyfriend at the time, my husband now, wanted to get out of the country and come to the States to study. So I just decided, okay, I'll go, but I'm going to start from zero into music.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah. So I did my undergraduate again. Luckily, I didn't have to take, because I already had a degree, I didn't have to take the electives. I only took music classes and voice and everything. And that's, this was in Philadelphia. I went to Temple University for my undergraduate there in music. And that's really when I started feeling myself. This is really what I want to do.
Wow.
And I love being on stage and just being able to express myself in ways that I wasn't able before to do. So anyhow, then I went to NEC for my master's. I met Diane. And that's the whole thing. I didn't know I was going to be singing forever.
So
Starting over to get a music degree sounds very brave. Did you experience it as really scary at the time, or was it just the thing you decided to do, or what?
No, it wasn't scary at all.
Huh.
It just felt like I belonged there. And I loved the music theory classes and the music history classes and my lessons and coachings. I just loved it.
Well, good for
you
you.
clearly do really belong there,
Yeah.
Clara. It's just,
Okay.
it's such a switch from sociology to music.
Mm.
But at the same time, in a certain respect, it isn't, right? Because sociology is understanding and lifting people up and helping them with their needs and their problems. And did we not just talk about how music does that, helps people with their problems and finding
Yep.
solutions and finding ways of expressing themselves and dealing with these difficulties?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
What a wonderful story. Thank you both so much for sharing
Yeah.
that. So you both bring music of Spain forward and feel important with Spain. Is there a connection besides Argentina and your history with your with the music to choose Spanish music as opposed to South American or Mexican or Argentinian?
Well, we performed Latin American music too. And actually, a week ago, we performed at Boston College some Schumann songs.
Right, right, yes.
So well, the company that Linda directs is dedicated mainly to Spanish music and culture. So when I joined them, they were already doing it. I just personally love singing in Spanish because I feel very connected to it. But I have to say, last week when we sang German, in German, I felt so good too, because German is such an expressive language. So, I mean, I have periods where one language dominates and periods where another one.
Yeah, it's the same for me. I will go back and forth. I'm performing all sorts of composers. But when we do the music of Spain, I should mention, sometimes we do a relationship thing. One year we did a Spanish Zarzuela, which is a form of, we call it Spanish opera. It's different, but it's, in essence, it's Spanish opera. But the program's name was From Spain to Cuba and Back, because the relationship from Spain to Cuba, and then how Cuba affected Spain with its own music and culture, is really interesting. So that's also one of the things we like to do, is to see how those connections are. So it gives a little historical and cultural element to things.
Cool.
It adds depth to your programs.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Linda, how did you choose Spanish music? Is it because it's underperformed, underrepresented, or was there something else for you?
Well, it's interesting. I've always, I guess when I was young, I remember hearing Spanish guitar on the radio or something, not in person. I did not grow up around any Spanish culture in my hometown. But I do remember my teacher giving me an easy version of Malaguena, and I just couldn't stop playing it. And I became, almost use the word again for before, became obsessed, like I did with Swan Lake, stop playing it. And years went by before I could figure out why. And I remember in college, there was a Spanish Renaissance composer I became acquainted with, and I had to do a paper, and I did it on him. And then I don't think it was even till about 10 or 15 years ago that I realized it has something to do with the scale passages. They're just, they're almost improvisatory as opposed to typical Western music. There's something to me almost mystical and meditative about it. So I think that's why, but I think it was just a natural thing. I just was drawn to it for some reason. Even though I was doing a lot of Bach and Mozart and Chopin, who were my three favorites, that I'm still doing them. Along with that, I did start to feel that there was not enough, or there were not enough people doing classical Spanish music. In fact, in college, I didn't even learn it. We learned the German composers and the French composers, English, and Clara would probably say that too. I don't know how much Spanish vocal leader you did, or I don't think it was high on the totem pole.
No.
I know. Yeah. And this is a bit lacking of respect to Spain and to Latin American music. So I did feel, like you were asking, I did feel that there was a need.
There definitely is.
I think there was a need, and it really is beautiful. People do like the music.
Oh yeah.
You get a great response, and it's even there's a lot of certainly contemporary Spanish composers as well, but a lot of it's very listenable and really, really more interesting than people realize. So that's my story with that.
Well, I'm so glad that you do bring forward all these Spanish composers, because it is an incredible gift, and they're wonderful. You're absolutely right. And they're not as well known as they should be. So thank you for doing that. I look forward to your program. And thank you so much for joining us. Your concert will be on Saturday, March 12th at 4 p.m. Our tickets are free and available through Eventbrite. And if you miss the concert, afterwards you can catch it on our YouTube channel, Dracut Arts YouTube. For more information, just email us at @gmail.com. Thank you so much, Clara.
Yes, thank you both so much for sharing your art and your stories.